PBS is being criticized for the way one of its 3-part series was funded, and it's in regard to school privatization. So there's this series that PBS puts out called School Inc., and it mostly focuses on privatizing education, and it has a very positive tone toward privatization of our school systems. And so an investigation into the funding for this series actually found some interesting information. Apparently the late Andrew Coulson, longtime head of the Cato Institute, was the driving force behind School Inc. And if you know anything about the Cato Institute, you are aware that it is a libertarian organization that's very much in favor of privatizing everything. And so there is a political agenda there. Also keep in mind that former US Assistant Secretary of Education, Diane Ravitch, found that the film was funded by a number of ARC conservative foundations with ties to the Dark Money ATM Donors Trust and the Ayn Rand Institute. And so there is definitely a concern there, because while PBS argues, look, we want to represent all people in the political spectrum, different ideas, keep in mind that if you see a series that only represents one side of the story, well, you can't just assume that everyone's gonna go out there and in search of the other side, right? And so it could really sway people in one direction or the other, and that's problematic. Now, the former Assistant Secretary of Education also said this program is paid propaganda. It does not search for the truth. It does not present opposing points of view. It is an advertisement for the demolition of public education and for the unregulated free market in education. PBS might have aired a program that debates these issues, but School Inc. does not. Now, if this was an isolated incident for PBS, it would still be problematic, but keep in mind that 3 years ago, back in 2014, David Sirota looked into another series that PBS was airing called Pension Peril. And he actually found that Pension Peril was funded to the tune of $3.5 million by John Arnold. He is a former executive at Enron who is very much against pensions. And so this Pension Peril series was very much in favor of cutting pensions for people like teachers, firefighters, police, stuff like that. And so because of David Sirota's reporting, PBS decided to return $3.5 million to John Arnold. But the damage was already done. I mean, they had already aired this Pension Peril piece. So just a little info on what's going on.
Yeah, my temptation is to defend PBS, but that's an old school instinct of, yeah, I mean, I don't mind PBS. I don't like picking apart where people got their money from, because conservatives give to charities, liberals give to charities, and then and PBS is not a charity, but could give to Greg Gianforte, who doesn't believe in a free and open. He just gave $50,000 to the free and open whatever that journalism society is. I didn't expect to be talking about it, so forgive my goofiness on that. But we know he doesn't care whether journalists are free to practice their trade. In fact, he does care. He doesn't want them to.
Right.
So I got it. He was forced to. But if it turns out as Diane Ravitch says, that it's incredibly one-sided and is airing on PBS, which instantly gives something the sweet smell of credibility, then that is a significant problem. I wouldn't just merely, if it were reasonably fair and balanced, if there were another side to it, if it were a look at the charter schools that work and the majority of them that don't really work or aren't significantly better anyway, and what we can learn from the ones that work, and maybe there is something that can happen here that'll
just providing a balanced view.
But my guess is if they paid millions and millions of dollars for this,
yeah, that's out of the
that they got the program they wanted, and that's got no business on PBS. You can air that. You put it on the internet, and you can air it on Fox. They'll put it on.
Agreed. Yeah, it's out, right? Like yeah, I was gonna look into it, but I had to watch The Bachelor or The Bachelorette for something, and it was only one piece of shit thing at a time. I can't do it all. But yeah, I mean, if it is this biased, and it's a 3-part series, they definitely had enough time to balance the perspective, and if they didn't do that, then PBS is responsible.
So I actually did look into it, and it is 100% one-sided, which is look. And part of the reason why I looked into it was not only because we're covering this story, but because privatizing education and taking public money and funneling it to private institutions in the form of vouchers is a hideous thing to do because it defunds public schools. It puts public money, taxpayer money, into private institutions that have a lack of oversight, lack of standards. In some cases, don't even believe in teaching science and focus on creationist theories and things like that. And also, I want to make sure that education remains an opportunity for those who can't afford school, right? And so if we privatize education completely, I think it's going to be a complete disaster for those who are disenfranchised, for those who might come from an underprivileged background. And so I care about this issue a lot, and I looked into it and I was like, wow, it's just very pro-privatizing. And of course it's going to be pro-privatization if an organization like the Cato Institute is involved. By the way, in regard to David Sirota's reporting on a similar issue back in 2014, the way it went down was also incredibly shady because people from PBS approached John Arnold and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this, so look, at the same time, I also understand that it's hard to be in the media, right? And it's hard to find the funding and it's hard to, do things as ethically as possible sometimes when you're also trying to balance the best interests of your viewers with raising enough money to do what you're doing. But at the same time, I mean, you're discrediting yourself if you go out there looking for money from people who have political agendas and then producing propaganda pieces that appease these individuals.
Yeah, and the problem is what we learned on November 8th is that propaganda, incredibly effective. Like we think of propaganda and we think of the Nazis in the 1940s and we think of the Soviets before the fall of the Cold War. Like first of all, we in this country have had some of the best because we're incredibly smart and creative and we've come up with some of the best propaganda in the history of the world. Some of it was used for good, right, in trying to win the war, sort of. But we know how to make propaganda films really effectively, and we're now starting to see the incredibly effective use of propaganda and how they can sort of trick and mislead the American voter. And it's genius to get something on PBS because then for the rest of time you get to say, why are you hitting us up on School Inc? It was on PBS.
Right, and I think that's the issue is that PBS has the benefit of being this neutral, network where if you show PBS in schools, so it gets the benefit of the doubt in that way. Whereas if it was on Netflix, then you kind of know when you're looking for content on Netflix that a lot of it can be crap. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, PBS taught me English. Like I would watch PBS as like a little kid to catch Sesame Street, and that's how I learned English. And so it breaks my heart to see all this, and hopefully, they straighten it all out because it's unacceptable to do propaganda pieces, especially when so many lives are at stake and education is at stake as well.
You don't like ads? Well, I hear you, brother. Did you know that you can become a Young Turks member, get the full 2-hour show every day on demand, plus so many other network shows, all ad-free for just $10 a month? Give it a shot right now, TYTnetwork.com/join.